I'm now joined by returning champ Freddie De Boer, who generously came on for a completely non-political Halloween bonus episode on the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, because I was excited when I saw that he'd written a blog post where he ranked all of them, or said all 9. I think that's not including the remake from like 2015 or whatever.
Includes the remake, actually.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Nice. So let me let's see. So I guess let's just go through these quickly. Lots of spoilers for anybody who decided to watch this or listen to it without first watching these movies from the 80s and 90s mostly. But in the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, Freddy Krueger, who is entering into the dreams of various children in this neighborhood in Elm Street. I think back then, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, or if you've seen these more recently than I have. I think back then they don't actually say where this is supposed to be, do they?
No, they don't define it geographically. They do in the later films, but not in the original, I don't think.
Yeah. So I think I'd kind of assumed like California maybe, but then I think it turned out to be Ohio. I think is what they eventually decided.
Something like
Anyways, so Freddy is this creature, this man with a burned face and claws, his knives on his they're coming out of his hands, who goes out and kills the neighborhood children while they sleep, and during the course of that movie you find out that he was a child killer. They say children, although in this and all the subsequent movies he seems to be mostly interested in teenagers, who was killed by a mob of neighborhood vigilantes. They set him on fire, hence his face and all the visible parts of his body being covered with burn scars. And at the end of the movie, the main character Nancy realizes that she can take away his power by kind of ignoring him or turning away from him. And that seems to solve it, although they do the horror movie thing where they tease at the very end that it isn't really solved. That as a matter of fact he's still going to be coming back in every single subsequent movie. There is some way that he is finally, no kidding, for real this time, really defeated or dead. They've done the thing that they really have to, and then of course it turns out that they didn't. So they made 9 of these, I guess. So let's see, there was Nightmare on Elm Street, then there was Nightmare on Elm Street 2 through 6, I want to say, where the 6 was Freddy's Dead, and then they made the New Nightmare, which was a meta thing about where it's set in the world where the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are movies, but you still have a version of Freddy who comes back in that. In a lot of ways, New Nightmare kind of anticipates a lot of later meta horror movies, certainly Cabin in the Woods, which maybe we can talk about the connection there later. So I guess that would bring it up to 7. There's Freddy versus Jason, which makes 8. And then you did include, I was wrong about that, the remake, which makes 9. So so I guess before we get into to your rankings of these movies, I mean, I guess I was just kind of curious about your experience of watching them. You said that these are things that you didn't watch until relatively recently.
Yeah, I as I said in the blog post, when I was young, I mean, I grew up in the absolute heyday of these movies in the 80s, and I just associated them with the schlock, which they often are. I mean, I would argue that, I mean, they have their defenders, but like the Friday the 13th movies, for example, with Jason, are mostly just irredeemable. But also, I didn't, because my name was Freddie, and growing up as a kid in the 80s with the name Freddie was not a lot of fun,
Sure.
as you can imagine. And so I had a resentment for them. But then I finally watched the original, and I found that I really liked it a lot. And I decided to watch all the rest of them in order, and give them my rankings. I think one thing that's really important to bear in mind with The Nightmare on Elm Street is that this the series gets lumped in with the Halloween movies and the Friday the 13th movies, but it's really a different generation than those movies. So Halloween comes out in 78. Friday the 13th comes out in 80. A lot of the sort of ancillary minor players in the slasher genre, like My Bloody Valentine, comes out in 81. Nightmare on Elm Street doesn't come out until 1984. And I think that kind of is part of its strength, which is that, you know, the Freddy is just so much more inventive and has so many other things you can do with him than with a Michael Myers or a Jason, because those guys are just fundamentally, at the end of the day, they're just big shambling guys who sort of hunt people down and kill them with machetes. Whereas Freddy has all these dream powers, which he can use to be sort of endlessly inventive. And I think that is really like, it's not really a valid comparison to sort of lump in either in terms of the timeline or just in terms of their themes and like in how they work. The Nightmare on Elm Street movies really are quite different from those earlier sort of first generation slashers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's also something just innately, creepier about the idea, right? Which I do want to say. Look, I mean, I think the first one's a classic. I think afterwards they all, I enjoy watching all of them. They all scratch a certain kind of itch, but these are not amazing movies, as they go on. But certainly the first one, and there is something about that's just an innately scarier idea, because it's not just like, oh, there's some big guy who's going to come and kill you with a knife. It's that if you fall asleep, this person's going to kill you, which I believe the story, as I remember it at least, is that Wes Craven, the filmmaker, had actually read about somebody who was from a Cambodian refugee family who'd been having like horrible nightmares. So he'd like was trying not to go to sleep, and in fact, this is a detail that made it into the movie. He had like a secret pot of coffee in his closet so he could stay awake. And then they finally managed to like bring in a doctor and get him sedated or something, and he had a heart attack in his sleep, which is the inspiration. But just the idea, I think, especially that the adults, the people in your life as a teenager who this is happening to, who would naturally be your sources of protection and stability, what they obviously want you to do for your sake, right? For your health, is to get some sleep, and the crazier you're talking, the more they want you to get some sleep. And so obviously this is something that's played with a lot of these movies, that with the best possible intentions, all of the adults in these teenagers' lives are constantly trying to do the thing that is in fact going to get them killed.
Well, and the thing is when you say that, I mean, I agree that, like, look, I find something to like in all of the sequels, but they're not very good movies as a whole. And for one of the reasons is that they just, for whatever reason, they don't follow the formula from the first one that you're laying out, which is, it's a really cool basic idea. It's a guy who can only kill you in your dreams, so you have to stave off sleep. That is almost never applied in any of the sequels, right? And so, and it's like, wow, isn't that like the basic coin of this franchise, But they just abandoned that, and it also leads.
That's true.
I mean,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, because there's so many built-in, like just the fact that the thing that you're trying to stop yourself from doing is something that it's just impossible. It's going to be physically impossible in the long term not to do.
Yeah.
Makes it such a great idea. But that's totally true. I mean, like, there are moments in a few of the later movies, where they do kind of go back to that well, but for the most part, weirdly, they really don't.
Well, one of the things I like about the remake is that it does push this sort of theme very hard, but it does result in some pretty amazingly weird things. Like in one of the instances, a guy falls asleep while he's swimming laps, which I would argue is a rather hard place to fall asleep. But
no, I mean, well, that's also something that gets more and more ridiculous as they go on, because there are a couple of, I think, in the first one, pretty effectively done sequences where somebody has like where there's some scene that's going on, like maybe in class at the high school, where the character thinks they're awake and they're going about their day, that it turns out they nodded off at the desk. All right, I can buy that. But as it goes on, right, I mean, the swimming laps thing is maybe the most ridiculous one, but since that was such an effective thing for them to do, those fake outs about whether you're asleep or whether you're dreaming, they do a lot of that in the subsequent movies. I mean, and it's not always plausible.
It's not always plausible. And the other, related is just that the rules of this universe are not consistent. So, like, again, basic idea. Freddy is a guy who could only kill you in your dreams. But in number 4, for example, he's just straight killing people in the real world, who are not asleep, And so there's no consistency whatsoever in sort of following the template that was put down by the first movie.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And actually, so an interesting thing of this is that they're already really messing with this in the second movie. So the second one, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, I want to say Freddy's Revenge. Yeah, Freddy's Revenge. There's which is a very weird movie, right? I know it was at the very bottom of your rankings, and it's also the big thing that I can't imagine anybody watching and not getting is that the whole thing is, to a really uncomfortable extent, there's this like really in-your-face metaphor about being gay in it, right? That's all over. That's all over that movie. And so in the second movie, it's following this family that is living in the house that Nancy, the protagonist of the first movie, had been living in, and Freddy is somehow possessing the son of this family, and so that's the cheat that lets Freddy kill people in the real world in the second movie, that he's doing it through this innocent guy that he's possessing, and there's lots of stuff where people in the movie, like I think he kills like maybe the gym coach, and the gym coach is being like invisibly dragged around in this way that's very suggestive of like BDSM, and at the end of the movie, in fact, since there does seem to be all this stuff that's very, very suggestive of the Freddy possession being gay analogy, at the very end of the movie, the main character's girlfriend brings him back from this affliction of his. So, make him out what you want to make of it.
Yeah, and there's I think the poster, or one of the posters anyway, is an image of him. He's holding his girlfriend, or the love interest anyway, close to him in a tender embrace, but that he's also looking into a mirror and seeing a monstrous self, So I caught hell from a few people for ranking number 2 the lowest. And I get, like, that is definitely an interesting sort of subplot going on in that movie. But to me, like, that subtext doesn't make up for the fact that it's just one ugly movie, man. I mean, usually you think a movie comes out and makes a ton of money, then the sequel will have a bigger budget than the original one. But everything about that movie is cheap. Everything looks cheap. And it's just kind of like just a nasty slice of movie for me. It just doesn't do it for me. You know, and I even like the concept of, you know, he's living in the house and that's what he's being haunted by. Which again, you know, what exactly happened to Freddie at the end of number 1, right? When Nancy stopped believing in him, and that somehow defeated him, I guess, you know. What exactly that moment meant, who, you know, nobody's really sure. So
yeah, she did the horror movie thing where she read some book about what some tribe believed about demons, and of course, since it's a horror movie, what it says in the book is just correct. In that universe, she just happened to stumble upon the book that has the correct information about this, except at the end of the movie it suggests that it's not, because again, you have to do the horror movie thing and tease that, you know, the monster is still there. And then yeah, in the second movie, I guess to give it credit, not as a movie, right, but at least for something resembling consistency, at least at that point they're still kind of trying to have a good answer to why he is going after teenagers, right? Because of course, like in the first movie, the idea was that, all right, he was this child killer, and the reason he's going after these people as teenagers is because these are the people who he didn't get to kill as children. That he was going after the children in the neighborhood, and these were the survivors, so he's going to settle for killing them as teenagers. But of course, the basic thing is that as a franchise, having Freddy Krueger hunt down sexy teenagers is fine. Having him kill actual children would just be disturbing. So they have to, you know, keep on coming up with reasons to do this. And at least, okay, well, he's a teenager who's living in the house that the house that Nancy lived in, so Freddy's spirit is still there. And then I guess since he's possessing him, the people he'll hunt down are the people in his life. So I'll more or less buy that. I'm sorry, you were saying?
No, sorry. Yeah. So speaking of that origin story, though, one thing that goes sort of cross movies is that in everything but the remake, he's a child murderer, but there is I think a lot of waving and hinting at him being a child molester. Right. But they never come out and make the subtext text until the remake. And in the remake, he's a child molester. And it's like, it seems like they really like wanted to imply that. I don't know if that would have jeopardized. I mean, there are movies, R-rated movies, so you think that it wouldn't be a problem. But I'm not sure if they thought it would jeopardize box office or something. But it's like, I find that to be the heavy subtext of a lot of these movies, is that he was in fact a child predator in that sense.
Yeah, and I guess in the very first movie, right, there's a iconic line which even kind of ruins one of the most effective things about that movie, which is that in the first movie, Freddy barely talks. In a lot of the sequels, he has like a long series of one-liners as he's killing people. I think in number 3, like he smashes somebody's head into the TV and says it's primetime, bitch. You know, there's a lot of things like that.
Yeah.
Anybody who's watched the Rick and Morty episode where they're kind of making fun of the Nightmare on Elm Street, movies, they kind of play on that there. But in the first one, mostly he's just kind of walking around silently. You hear his knives scraping on the furnace, stuff like that. But the one time they do give him a line like that is when Nancy's asleep, so she picks up the phone and he's on the other end, and the tongue comes out of the phone and he says, "I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy." So, I mean, I guess that was I agree it was always in the background, but I guess maybe that was the strongest hint.
I mean, there's also when she's in the bath in the first one and his hand emerges from between her legs, is a little overt. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's very true. Yeah. Absolutely. So then, actually, I guess let's just go through this chronologically. Although after this, the rankings were all over the place. But in number 2, Wes Craven, the creator of the original, was not making. Which I think you could tell, but then he comes back for number 3, Dream Warriors, which is I think a movie that people who like these movies tend to like. If they have like a second favorite after the first one, that tends to be it.
That's the case for me. Yeah, this is the one I have ranked number 2. It's a lot of fun. I think that I think that there was a sort of a recognition that you needed more variety somehow, and so having the subtitle is the Dream Warriors. So having these characters who discovered that they have their own abilities that they can use in the dream world, that they can have superpowers, I think is really sharp. And I think that also the reintroduction of Nancy, where she is involved but is not the protagonist, I also think is a good choice. I think it's cool to have a different team. I think Patricia Arquette plays the lead in this, but you have Nancy in sort of like an advisory role, so you can reincorporate her without her sort of dominating the screen time. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, so I should say in number 3, we meet a new group of teenagers who were at a mental institution, I guess, that they've been sent to because they're complaining about being about this guy who's trying to kill them in their dreams, and of course they kind of point out the absurdity of it. I think in an early scene where one of the teenagers at the facility tells one of the employees, right, I don't understand how it never seems to impress you people that we're all having the same delusion, and we all had it independently. But then Nancy from the first movie starts working there, and one of the details is that there's a point where she's talking to, I think, the director of the facility, and a little bottle of pills spills out of her purse, and you see that she has been over these years since the first movie, she's been clearly whatever happened there at the end of the first movie where she was turning away from Freddy and denying him his power didn't take, because she's been taking these pills to suppress dreaming, while she sleeps, to get out of that bind, right? That the only way to avoid Freddy is to not sleep. But of course, good luck with that, right? Eventually you are going to get to sleep. But rather than just being the sort of format of the first one, which is kind of the classic horror movie format in some ways, that a series of people are, series of hapless people are hunted down and killed one at a time, until the final girl, finally does something to defeat the monster. In number 3, as you say, it turns out that all of these kids have their own dream powers. So a bunch of them team up to defeat Freddy at the end of the movie.
Yeah, and so there's a cool sort of showdown scene. There's sort of subplot. So there is a sort of origin story sort of going on regarding his remains, and
yes.
So Freddy wants to get. So apparently, Freddy. The way to take Freddy out is to bury his bones in consecrated ground, according to this nun, who apparently is the mother of Freddy, who, in a very vicious gang rape by mental patients, which is a little grim even for this genre. But the nun tells them, you got to bury him in consecrated ground. What's amazing to me is it works even though they bury him literally in a junkyard, which I guess qualifies as consecrated ground.
Actually, I'm trying to remember. I know I've seen this movie a few times. Is there an explanation of why the junkyard counts as consecrated ground? Like, did it used to be a church, or what?
If there is an explanation, I missed it. So
okay, fair enough. So this is all. So yeah, I remember. I don't think they use this line in number 3, but in one of the later movies, there's a line used repeatedly about how Freddy is the son of 100 maniacs or something like that, because of this gang rape scene that's at least alluded to.
I might be transposing it from number 4 to number 3. It might be that explanation is in number 4, and I'm just thinking it's in number 3. So they do tend to blend together in my mind a little.
Sure. So yeah, no, that could be right, but we do definitely get the nun in number 3, right? That much I remember for sure, and I believe that we are told that the reason she knows about all this stuff is that she's Freddie's mother. I'm fairly sure of that, and for sure there is this thing about burying him in consecrated ground, which I guess in a way, like one of the weird things about these movies actually is the role of Catholicism in it, which you get a little teeny bit of even in the first movie, because there's a song that in a lot of dream sequences, little girls are jumping rope and they're singing this song, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. And one of the lines in the song is about grabbing a crucifix. And so that's there then. I think that line is even in the first movie, but that's it, right? First movie, second movie, that's the only hint of any sort of religious anything to this mythology. But then you get the nun in number 3, and you start to hear a lot. I want to say maybe in number 4 about how what Freddy is doing is he's somehow like harvesting or capturing the souls of his victims.
Yeah, so that is, there's in one of the later ones, I think maybe in 5. He reveals his chest to show the faces of people who he's absorbed. But also,
there's also a scene I always remember with where they're at like a pizza shop in a dream, and there's a pizza that has the souls of the victims on it as like a toppings.
Yeah, but it's again, like the rules change from movie to movie. In Freddy versus Jason, he can only survive on fear. Right, which I guess kind of connects back to number 1 when Nancy refuses to fear him or whatever. But he has to harvest the fear of people in order to exist or whatever. So who knows?
Yeah, no, fair enough, right? So in number 3, Nancy dies at the end of the movie. I think her father, who's a cop, who was plays a big role in the first movie, and he also comes back in the third movie. I believe he also dies at the end. And then in number 4, though, we're continuing to follow the surviving characters from number 3, right? I think they're I want to say they're like maybe at this point. Well, they're back at high school, right? They're not in the mental facility anymore.
They somehow all ended up at the same high school.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, they're at the same high school. Freddy's back. Do they bother at that point with an explanation of why or how Freddy is back?
I don't think so. I think he's just back. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
As usual.
Yeah. So I know. I will say this is where it's going to get trickiest for me to reconstruct the plots, because I think 4 and 5 especially blend together for me, and I'm definitely not sure that I can sort out what's what there, but.
I mean, so in 4 is the one where, the thing that I don't like about 4. I think it's kind of a fan favorite for some people. I don't like it nearly as much. The thing I don't like about 4 is that we've been introduced to these Dream Warrior characters, and we see Freddy fight Freddy and win in number 3, and then in number 4 it's just Freddy killing them off.
Yeah.
Which I get. I know it's a slasher movie, and in slasher movies, anybody who survives, who's not the final girl, dies. Like that's just part of the deal. If you survive in one movie, you die in the next one. It's even true in like Scream. But still, like, for me, it's like I like these guys. I like their powers. I like and they just get taken out. So
at the very least, having gone through, like, put so much emphasis on these dream powers they have in number 3, just having them get snuffed out that easily seems kind of ridiculous. So yeah, this was actually, yeah. So I could see on your list, number 4, Dream Master, uh, was number 7 out of 9 on your
Mm.
list. Okay. Incidental detail that you noted in here that I'd completely forgotten about. That there's a dog named Jason, which
Jason,
might
yeah,
be, yeah,
yeah.
might be a funny wink at the Friday the 13th movies. So in and you also point out that in one very small way it does bust convention, because there's somebody who's like this tall athletic jock who looks exactly like the bad guy from the 1080s movies, who's actually a completely good guy in this movie. There's no hint of what you would expect him to be.
That's one of the things I've always hated about film depictions of high school is that everyone in who's popular in high school is always like a complete sociopath in movies, you know. And sure, some popular people are terrible, but there's some popular people who are popular because they're like friendly and kind, you know,
Right, right,
like
right. In fact, that's very
that
often
does
part of
exist.
why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that does exist, but you would never know it from American cinema. You have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. You always sort of like imagine those kids, the guys at least, in in 80s movies especially, right? They're always the ones who are, they're the Cobra Kai, or the sort of the ones trying to stop, the community center, ski lodge, whatever it is, that's trying to be saved.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Uh, Fair enough. So then you were not a fan of that one, but you were even less of a fan of Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, which was number 8 out of 9 on the list.
Yeah, I don't remember it. Like I'm trying to read back over my notes to see what this one was about. So yeah, I mean, it does have a fairly interesting premise in the sense that there's going to be a child born from dreams. Um, Freddie seems to think that the child will be bad, but the child actually ends up being good and helps to defeat Freddie. Yeah, like I said in the thing, that he vomits a flesh torpedo at Freddie, and that's what kills
That's
him.
right.
But in terms of the particulars, this one is the one that to me is the most generic. It's the most of them just going through the motions. It's the most without sort of an interesting hook of its own to sort of live through. Also, the Dream Child is very specifically a boy in this one, but in the next one, in Freddy's Dead, it's a girl. So it's a complete retcon, just changing it for the sake of changing it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is sort of interesting. I think that if I'm remembering here that so yeah, there's this child that's born of dreams, which already suggests that we're that the Christian and specifically Catholic element from the previous movies is getting pretty strong here.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a way, it's almost like omany. Obviously in a really goofy way because it's Nightmare on Elm Street. But I think that we start with the nun at the beginning of this movie, and there is and there's this kind of fantasy sequence about the monstrous version of the child being born, although that's not how it turns out at the end of the movie. So in a lot of ways, number 5 is kind of the end of the I guess we could say in a way straightforward.
The classic era.
Yeah, the classic era
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street movies, where it's the last movie where you're basically just following around teenagers who are in some like in some fairly normal world, are fighting off Freddy. Like things start to get like a little bit weird and meta in 6, Freddy's Dead, and then especially in the 7th movie, the New Nightmare. But start out with number 6. So Freddy Freddy's Dead
I,
makes it
I mean,
reasonably high on your list.
yeah, I like it. I like it. It's very weird. I
Yeah.
like that it's weird. It is. It's like I like. There's a sort of an initial premise, which is that the city, the town where Springwood, where Freddie is, where Nancy lived, and the Elm Street house is, has become like a children of men situation where no children are being born, which is interesting because the implication being that Freddie is someone who attacks teenagers and children, and if there's no one to dream of him and be scared of him, then he won't exist or have power or whatever. But it's about this halfway house is what I would call it. Like they call it a shelter, but it's really like some sort of a halfway house or psychiatric facility, and there's a lot of talking about Freddie in this movie. Like Yaphet Kotto plays a psychiatrist, and there's several scenes of just like people just considering the essence of Freddie or whatever.
Yeah.
But then like the big thing from it, the most memorable thing from it is that it was the 3D one.
Yeah, I remember. I had for years. I think I gave it to somebody because I was like going out of the country for a year, but I had for a long time the box set of, I guess it was the first 7 movies, and in there, I remember that like the backs of the DVDs, like there was a sort of picture spread out over it of Freddie turned around in a trench coat, but in there, right, it came with 3D glasses for the 6th movie, because there's this extended 3D sequence when they're fighting him at the end, and you get a lot of more mythology about, like, was it the 7 dream demons who somehow decided to give this child murderer his power.
Yeah, something like that. Which again, the whole thing is so weird. I was just along for the ride, basically, at that point. But it's funny because it's like, it's obvious that you've reached the 3D part because things keep coming into the screen in ways that are completely unnecessary. But also, she literally has to put on 3D glasses for some reason. Like Yaphet Kotto was like, wear these glasses, and she has to put on 3D glasses for no reason other than to signal to the audience that it's time. It's a very low budget in a sense, but
it is. I mean, it kind of reminds me of a movie. God, what's it called? It was like I think it might have just been called like The Werewolf Must Die or something. It's this 70s movie that at this video store that I used to go to, and where I grew up in Michigan, they'd have this like this like bin of like dollar VHS things, and we found it in there, and I watched with my friend Les, and we there, I guess it was made to be shown in drive-ins, and there was actually a thing that they told you they'd do at the beginning where like 3/4 of the way through the movie they're going to reveal who the werewolf is, and so it's this planned werewolf break that they like announce in the movie. You're supposed to shout out who you think it is, so it's sort of on that level, right?
That's exactly like that.
Put on your 3D glasses.
I gotta tell you, when I was a kid and I saw the commercial for these movies, and they played this up so much, it's Freddy's gonna die. That's it. This is the end of Freddy. Which of course, they also did with Friday the 13th. They said, the last one or whatever they called that one. But I was so overjoyed because I thought my torment would end, but I was wrong.
No, of course not. Yeah, so 6 is already an extremely strange movie. There's I mean, there's the Children of Men thing. There's the fact when they go back to Springwood, Ohio. I think that's where the nightmare. Yeah. That's where Elm Street is supposed to be. They eventually decided, and it seems like everybody who still lives in the town is like severely mentally ill, and there's just a lot of they're really running with the stuff with just the kind of surreal, lurid, dream stuff. Like I think the opening sequence of that movie is a play on the Wizard of Oz, a house blowing away while Freddy comes by on a broomstick, like the Wicked Witch. I think there might be a quote from Descartes about dreams at the beginning of it. it's hard to overstate how strange this movie is. 7 in a way is less so, but it's also much more of a meta thing than 6, because as we already mentioned in 7, right? So 6 is the official last movie, although obviously there are 3 more after that. And so because 6 was the official last movie, they do this weird thing where they kind of transpose it, even though, so I believe if I'm remembering right, so it's the same actress who plays Nancy in 1 and 3 is back in this movie. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Heather Langenkamp, yeah.
Yeah, so she's back, but she's playing, she's playing Heather Langenkamp, right? You know, she's playing the actress who's playing Nancy in these movies, and like Wes Craven is in the movie as himself, and she, you know, I think she's married to like some kind of like, was it like a effects guy or something who works on the movie. I remember watching a documentary about this where somebody points out that, you know, the actor who's supposed to be her husband there is the, you know, looks the least like one of these effects guys of anybody you can possibly imagine, because like the real ones are like these big beefy guys who will, you know, be wearing like Metallica t-shirts or whatever, and you know, he looks like an actor.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the weird subplot that Freddy is causing earthquakes in Los Angeles, which is completely unexplained and doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah, you know, it's interesting because this movie came out, you know, like 2 years, I think, or something, before Scream did. And Scream is another Wes Craven movie, and Scream is known for its meta approach to it's the meta slasher movie.
Yeah, we should say that Wes Craven did make New Nightmare, right? I think that 3 and 1 are the 3 that he actually made.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's interesting. You know, one of the first things is that struck me watching it is just that like the production values seem much higher than the movies that had come before it. Even the original, I think that it just looks like a much less cheap movie than the other ones did, and it sort of has like, it kind of has pretensions to be the serious Freddy movie, you know, like the one that really makes you think, and that, you know, and has all these, you know, meta theatrics and stuff like that. It doesn't 100% work for me personally. Like I just like, maybe I'm of a generation that has seen so much meta stuff, right, and has seen everything undermined so much that it doesn't register. Like I've seen Scream a million times, you know, and so it's like maybe just the meta stuff just bounces off of me in a way that it wouldn't somebody who's coming to this thing fresh.
No, that's probably right. I mean, I think I'm in the same category. I mean, in my case, like I watched all of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies as an adult since, you know, my parents didn't let me watch horror movies, you know, when these were actually coming out, you know, when I was growing up, and then. And then so because though I had this sort of vague memory of these movies being huge, you know, I think when I sort of did get the itch at some point in college, like, oh, I'm going to watch a bunch of these movies. Then those were some of the first ones I watched. But I think I'd probably watched Scream like several times before I watched this. And it is also like, I mean, they sort of make a big point of this in the movie that like this real version of Freddy, they say, is much darker, you know, than the original Freddy. And I think there's a sense in which maybe it doesn't work as well as other kinds of meta horror movies like Scream or like Cabin in the Woods, which I mentioned earlier. I think this is a big influence on, because I think those other ones combine it with a lightness that helps make it work, and New Nightmare, I think, takes itself a little bit too seriously for a meta Freddy Krueger movie. But it is remarkable. So as you say, Scream came out a couple years later, was also directed by Wes Craven. In fact, there's a line at the beginning of Scream, the very first phone call at the beginning of the movie, you know, where what's your favorite scary movie? And I don't know. Well, what about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies? Those were scary. The first one was. The rest were just dumb. So there's a little self-criticism in there. But then much later, I remember being really struck watching Cabin in the Woods. There's a kind of explanation at the end of that movie about how this is all an elaborate human sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a temple that like is almost straight out of the temple that you get at the end of New Nightmare that Nancy comes into at the end of that movie.
Let me just say for Cabin in the Woods, I think the thing that movie does best is it makes you root for the survival of the two characters, right? But in doing so, you're rooting for the total horrific destruction of the world, right. Which will probably end up killing those two characters anyway. Right. But you're so rooting for them to win that it doesn't matter if that the whole world is going to be drenched in blood.
No, that's true. That is that is very good. The way that they actually managed to make you do that. So after New Nightmare, which by the way, where did New Nightmare go in your rankings?
New Nightmare was below number 6, Freddy's Dead, but above number 4. So it's number 6 in my list. So yeah,
okay.
It's not bad, but the major conceit just doesn't do anything for me. Now the next one.
Yeah, the next one is Freddy versus Jason, which I remember seeing in the theater. In fact, the movie kind of got me out of a traffic ticket because I was on the way back from the movie theater with my little brother, and I was pulled over, I guess probably for speeding. And the cop asked where I was coming from, and I said, I was coming from the movie theater. I said, what were you watching? I said, Freddy versus Jason. And then like he got excited, and we just had this conversation about the Freddy and Jason movies for like 5 minutes. He was like, okay, whatever, keep going. But
nice.
So what happens in Freddy versus Jason? Oh my
God, this movie I just rewatched it quite recently. So like it's really interesting because New Nightmare comes out and it's the meta one, and this one could not be less meta. Like it is the most sort of like knuckle-headed movie imaginable, but it is 100% sincere. I mean, the first thing is that like you know immediately that you're watching a new era of movie. It looks like a mid-2000s movie. It came out in 2003, and it looks like it. Like the film stock is different, or if it's digital, it's digital. The special effects are different. The cinematography is different. The music's different. But it's just this. I mean, from the beginning, they're just going for it so hard, and it's just giving you exactly what you asked for, which is Freddy versus Jason. So it does. The initial plot doesn't make much sense to me because Freddy needs to. So as suggested in earlier movies, Freddy needs people fearing him to exist.
Right.
So as we open on this movie, not enough people are fearing him. It turns out that the people who knew about him, the kids who knew about him, are in an insane asylum getting a hypnosil, a drug that keeps them asleep with no dreams. But so Freddy wants to get people afraid of him again so that he can have his powers back. So what he does is he summons Jason to kill people.
There's like one sentence establishing how this works, that he scoured hell until he found this like fearsome killer who could kill people so that he would kill the teenagers from Street so that people would in Springwood. So then they were people, which I guess is sort of back to normal. Right. So then when he did that, people would think that it was Freddy, so they would fear him, and that would allow him to come back for real.
Yes. And it doesn't make, I mean, like, why would Jason killing teens increase fear of Freddy? I don't understand it even a little bit. But it's just a movie that is there to give you what you came to see, including some very gratuitous topless shots in the movie. Right. Which that goes back to the DNA of slasher movies, man. That's. But in any event, like I really enjoy it. The final confrontation between Freddy and Jason is very drawn out, but it's still kind of unsatisfying in my opinion. I just think that like nothing after all that build up, nothing could kind of pay off that well. But it's a big, dumb, stupid movie that I like a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really enjoyed it also. They certainly, I mean, I think even by the standard, I will say even by the standards of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, I think that they, like, I think the characters, like, almost might as well not have names, you know, there's like you could just be, you know, stoner guy, you know, what, like, whatever, right? They're all, like I said, even by those standards, they're all very stock. There's a lot that doesn't, like you said, right? There's this big fight, you know, there's this very extended fight between Freddy and Jason at the end. There's a lot of this thing that you get in a certain kind of supernatural horror movie where everybody's guesses about how these things would work just turn out to be right the first time.
Right.
So the kids just kind of somehow have this intuition that if they that they can take Jason, who's been subdued, to Camp Crystal Lake, and that because that's where he's from, then he's going to have more power there, and so he'll be able to defeat Freddy there, and that's more or less what happens. Although it's also even if you hadn't watched the previous 7 movies and didn't know that nothing ever really finally defeats Freddy at the end, even if you'd only watched this movie, I think just seeing, I guess, what we're supposed to see at the end of the movie, which is when, you know, Jason like is holding Freddy's severed head and just kind of taking that as like, oh, okay, well, that's taken care of now. It's like, well, I mean, he's this dream creature who it's not at all clear that, you know, any rules about the physical world are even relevant to him. So it's a very weird kind of payoff at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But all that said, very fun movie, right?
Very
like I've seen
movie.
Multiple times. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I recommend it. I do. It's really, it really goes for it. And there's a few people there who like you'll see and say, oh, I know that person. It also includes a member of Destiny's Child saying a homophobic slur at Freddy Krueger, which is not something I'd ever see in my life.
Sure, fair enough.
If that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is.
All right. So last, not least, there is the remake, which I'm trying to think here. I think this actually, I want to say like 2012, something like that.
2010.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Because I remember where I was when I saw it, but that's okay. That fair enough. Yeah. So this is just a remake of the first movie. It's a reboot. But like New Nightmare, it's trying to kind of steer away from the increasingly campy Freddy that we got in the original movies, and to do something that would be a little darker, a little grittier, including, as you kind of alluded to, of like really going for that subtext that was always there, that Freddy was a child molester.
Yeah, it's so you as you mentioned, the Freddy in the original is much less likely to say a one-liner. And I do find that as the series goes on, that just the number of one-liners from Freddy gets grating for me. And so this is definitely a decampified Freddy. I'm going to lose all my credibility saying this. Okay. But if you ask me, like, which of these movies is just as a movie the best movie, it might be this one. Like, just in terms of like a well-made movie, like a filmmaking as a piece of craft in terms of cinematography and acting and effects and everything. It's really well done, and it's also up until the end a very faithful remake. Really, I mean, it's not like a reboot in the sense of taking it in a completely new direction. It doesn't have the soul of the first, number one and number three. It doesn't have the novelty. It doesn't have quite as much character, but it is a very well made movie. Rooney Mara is great in it, by the way.
Yeah. No, so actually, I think. All right, so I will go back and so I saw the remake once when it was in the theater, and I will say that it didn't. I mean, it didn't leave that much of an impression. Like I kind of, as I'm thinking back to it, I kind of remember some of the atmosphere. Some of the grittiness, definitely some of the child molester suggestion. But I
mean, I think that there's definitely a fair point to be made if someone wants to say, why does this need to exist? Right? Like right. we have the original. So right. Why does this thing need to exist? I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, but given that it does exist, do you think it did a good job of
yeah.
No,
it could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. Yeah.
No, that's
worth saying.
Yeah, that's for sure. It is very easy to imagine a terrible contemporary remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, and this to be fair wasn't that. I think it might not have been the most memorable movie ever, but it didn't do anything egregious with the setup. It was fairly faithful. If the other 8 movies didn't exist, and that was it, right? This was the only Nightmare on Elm Street entry that there was. You'd probably watch it and think, oh yeah, no, I kind of liked that. Like there was this kind of like quirky horror movie I watched, Nightmare on Elm Street. It was pretty good.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Agreed.
So in your rankings, since I know we've kind of referred to these as we've gone, but people might lose track. So number 9 at the very bottom is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Number 8 is Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. Number 7 is Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Number 6 is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I'd forgotten that his name is even in the name right. of it. Number 5 is Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Number 4 is the reboot, the remake. Number 3 is Freddy versus Jason. Number 2 is and I think whatever you think about the rest of these rankings, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who likes these movies a lot who doesn't agree with the final 2. So number 2, the runner-up, is Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, and number 1 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. So I thought maybe we could just close out by talking for a minute about what it was that like, okay, so besides sort of spawning this goofy, very fun to watch, oftentimes very convoluted and ridiculous series, what it was that made number 1 so good as a standalone movie.
I think it's just Freddy is genuinely menacing in a way that he's not for most of these movies. I think that Heather Langenkamp, who plays Nancy, does an excellent job. I like Johnny Depp in it as the clueless boy toy guy.
Yeah, that was actually his first movie, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. But I think that it was like the as I was saying before, the only one that really truly realizes the conceit of if you fall asleep you die, and like they're taking no-dose pills, caffeine pills, to stay awake, and like and secret mugs of coffee and stuff like that, and like that whole thing, like the fear of sleep, I think is such a potent thing because sleep is so fundamental to the way that we engage with the world. And so I think for that reason, it's the most evocative and moving in that sense.
Nice. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think, again, I'm very fond of all of these movies in their own ways. Maybe there are a couple of them less so, but for the most part, right, I'm extremely fond of these movies, but all of them. But the first one is actually like legitimately a great movie. I mean, like that would be on like my list of like maybe the top 5 horror movies ever. and it's actually, by the way, did you watch It Follows?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because like that's like one of the few things that stands out to me as like as a more contemporary, like a movie from the last 10 years that feels very much like the kind of thing that that Wes Craven was doing with those movies.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. Yeah, the sense of a remorseless enemy that is going to follow you forever, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and some of the just the kind of dreamy atmosphere of it, for sure.
I mean, I would just say to wrap up, like I do think that there is treasure to be found in the deep cuts of this franchise. I don't feel the same way about Halloween or Friday the 13th. I think that like if you grab a random Halloween or especially a random Friday the 13th, it's really easy to find something that just has no redeeming quality at all. Like Friday the 13th Part 5 is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. But there's always some hook in these movies that makes them interesting, something that's worth seeing.
No, I think that's right. I mean, actually, Friday the 13th is a really weird case because the first movie actually had a halfway interesting premise. It was the Inside Out Psycho. It's it's the mother who thinks that her dead son is telling her to kill people, instead of the other way around. And then like they kind of transition from that to maybe the most uninteresting possible kind of, he's a big guy in a hockey mask who's going to try to kill you with a big knife, and that's kind of it, right? Like the only thing that's interesting about those movies is maybe in the later ones the sort of weird things that they're doing to justify keeping up with new movies. But it's there's something kind of kind of lifeless about it. Similarly, like Halloween, the first one was this fairly like the first Halloween I think was this sort of it was a very simple kind of slasher movie, but it was just a perfectly executed version of that movie. And then, of course, you're not going to recreate that in what follows. So like I think in both of those cases, I think it's kind of too bad that they even made sequels. Whereas in the Nightmare on Elm Street case, even though the first one is like a genuinely good movie in ways that most of the rest aren't, it's also like anytime somebody said, well, I don't know, before the pandemic, say I'm going to like order pizza and I'm going to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, fill in the blank, be like, oh yeah, that sounds fun. I'll come over. Right. Like, like those are all, I think because, I think maybe just because it's so, like the setup is so zany. There's a kind of like, creative freedom, even though they're not all good movies, that to sort of do strange things with them that make them compelling watching. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there's every single one of those movies does something for me. I'm happy, like I'm happy that they all exist. If you like movies like this, you're not gonna be sorry that you, like, if you just like go through and watch all 9, right? You're not going to be sorry that you watch these. It's not going to be like, oh God, another one of these movies. Yep. So thank you so much, Freddie, for doing this. If anybody is watching or listening to this, who's curious about what Freddie is writing or thinking about when he's not blogging about movies. You can go back and watch or listen to a previous conversation that I had with him about his excellent book, the Cult of Smart, how our failed educational system promotes social injustice. Am I getting that subtitle right?
It's how our broken educational system perpetuates social inequality.
Okay. Yep.
I didn't write that subtitle, by the way.
Fair enough. Well, it's a very good book. I really enjoyed that. I'm glad we got to talk about that, but I'm also glad that we got to talk about this, because this is something that this is something that a lot of hours of my life have been spent watching these movies, and I don't get a chance to talk about them nearly enough. So thank you again, Freddie.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon, Ben.
Talk soon. Bye.